Think you know what way it's going to go? Make your bet at Sports Interaction. Whatever your sport, Sports Interaction has you covered pregame, live betting on all major sports, and prop bets. Want to bet? Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. 19 and over, please play responsibly.
Brian Finlayson asks, could you legitimately see the Winnipeg Jets make a big splash on or before the trade deadline?
It's just not in their DNA, is it? That's the one thing I think about when it comes to Winnipeg. I mean, Kevin Cheveldayoff, they're long time. They're in the existence of Winnipeg Jets 2.0. Their only general manager, is not really been someone who's rolled the dice. I mean, I think back actually a few years, he did make a pretty big trade for Paul Stastny, when Stastny was at a more impactful part of his career and at the deadline. And, that team ended up going to the Western Conference final. But in general, that they've not been a splashy kind of throw all the chips in sort of team. If there's ever a year to do it, it might be this one. That's how I look at the Jets. I mean, they've had such success under Rick Bowness. Well, look, Rick is not going to be there long term. That's not a hot scoop. It's just a fact of his age, and he almost retired after last season. So he's a short-term head coach. You have Pierre-Luc Dubois, he's a restricted free agent this summer, but 1 year out from UFA. You have Mark Scheifele, he has next season under contract, then he's a potential UFA. Blake Wheeler's on the back 9/back 3 of his career. You just have a small window here where this Jets team, I think, has a chance to go for it. And so maybe they do, but my gut tells me that they won't be, going and trading for one of the top 3 or 4 players that we see on the trade boards these days. I mean, they have a really deep forward group, right? I think that in addition to that, blue line could help. Maybe someone in their bottom 6 or, third line forward, type of addition makes sense for them. But, I don't see them swinging for the fences. It's just not really the way they do business.
From Rex McDowd on Discord, have you heard any information on the Dylan Larkin situation? And what are your thoughts on whether or not he will be signed or traded?
I'd be surprised if he's traded. From what I can tell, the conversation about his contract extension, he's a pending unrestricted free agent, has been ongoing throughout the year. I don't sense any bad blood in that situation, even though it has extended now well into this season, and you're getting closer and closer to where potentially, I guess, he is walking out the door. But given that he's their captain, what he's meant to their team, and I think ultimately, you look at what Dylan Larkin is. I mean, he's a very good player, but the fact that Detroit can give him 8 years, I'm not sure he could get more total value on the contract as a free agent on a 7-year deal, which is the most he could if he was a free agent, on what Detroit will probably be willing to give him on an 8-year contract. And so, I view this a little bit like Philip Forsberg in Nashville last year, or like we're seeing right now with David Pastrnak and the Bruins. Yes, you're talking about players that could go through free. I just think they're staying where they are. I think for Dylan Larkin, he's been through some tough years for the organization in Detroit, but he's their captain. He sees that they're on the right track in terms of becoming more competitive. And, wouldn't surprise me in the least to see him extended at some point. I don't think he's really in play at this deadline for a trade chip.
This one is from Joe from the Bridge. Curious to know if Lawson Krouse's name is out there at all. Seems like he'd be a perfect fit for the Maple Leafs. Would the Yotes be willing to move him? He is 4 years after this year at $4.3 million. His AAV is $4.3 million, I should say.
I haven't heard his name out there specifically, I'll be honest. I do know that the Coyotes are willing to do just about anything. I mean, it's pretty clear what their plan of attack is at this point in time. And, they're trying to maximize their current assets for future ones. So I would not rule out the possibility that Lawson Krouse is traded, but, I haven't heard any specific rumors about him, being linked to any team. So that's the best and most fair way I can answer that question. I do think the Coyotes would consider moving him, but, let's look at how they've handled Jakob Chychrun, right? I mean, he's had a high price attached to him because they know they're trading him to a team that could maybe have him for 3 trade deadlines, or maybe 3 playoff runs, or even 2 playoff runs. And then you trade him when he's a UFA and get some of the assets back. And so the fact that Krouse is locked up, I don't think by any stretch Arizona feels like they have to move him, but I think Bill Armstrong's open to listening to anything at this point.
Let me give you a few more from Sprague. So this just might be wishful thinking from a fan of both teams. But what are the chances Timo Meier moves north to Seattle? Looking at it, it makes sense for a team that needs a defined scorer, as well as an RFA going to a team that is still building for the future.
I don't think that's likely. I mean, we've heard Timo Meier more linked to teams in the East, Carolina, New Jersey, teams like that I think would be open to moving him. I think if Seattle were to make that kind of move, it's likely for a centerman. But we'll have to see. I mean, I think it's an interesting deadline for the Kraken because in so many ways this year is a bonus, right? That they are better than most people expected, probably even internally didn't anticipate, themselves being right at the top of the Pacific Division this late into the season. And so that creates a good problem to have for Ron Francis. I think that no one wants to get carried away and giving up, a lot of current day pieces just for a rental. But there's also an opportunity here to augment your team and what looks like it's going to be a playoff season for Seattle. So, I don't know that they're going to end up being in on any of the sort of the top players, the biggest names. But we'll have to see. I mean, it's certainly, I guess, if Meier were willing to, negotiate an extension as part of a trade like that, it could be a fit. But I haven't heard anything to connect them at this point.
Okay. Got one last one for you from Stinkface McPoop Lightning. It's probably a really weird Twitter name. Who's been your favorite co-host of the CJ show? Montreal Canadiens reporter Julian McKenzie or Calgary Flames reporter Julian McKenzie? It's a weird one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't differentiate that way, but I would say Calgary Flames reporter Julian McKenzie. We're finding our groove in the second season. You're finding your groove. I feel like personally, it's nice to have you be so in touch with the Western Conference. I mean, I think it gives us a better rounded view of the show. Just watching those teams more, seeing them come through your city, talking to people around them. So yeah, I think I'll give this version of you the slight edge, but I certainly had no issues with Montreal Canadiens reporter Julian McKenzie.
Oh, well, that's nice of you to say. I feel as if like Calgary Flames reporter me is less stressed for whatever reason than Canadiens one, because I don't know. I feel like my brain was like doing 300 different things in the past jobs I was doing. Now it's a little bit more focused. It's like, okay, I got to talk about the Flames, but you bring up a really good point too. Like I'm in the Western Conference, I get to see, well, in a different schedule, maybe I'd see Connor McDavid more than 3 times a year, but I have that, or the Colorado Avalanche a little bit more often, the Seattle Kraken a little bit more often, or the Dallas Stars, or teams in the Western Conference that I wouldn't normally see as frequently as I would in the East. So that's actually a really good point. We have perspectives from 2 conferences now. I didn't think about this when I made the move.
Yeah, but it is nice. I mean, just because it's easy to get in your own little bubble, whatever that bubble is. It could be a Western Conference bubble. It could be a Toronto-centric bubble. It's nice to have some differing viewpoints. Obviously, we're at different stages of our career too. Like I think that's what works. So I like this version of you, but if you end up moving somewhere else, I'm not gonna. I'll take whatever version of you we get, my man.
I'll take whatever version we get of you. There was a really cheesy Instagram post I saw over the weekend. Something along the lines of, I think you're a different person than you were a year ago. And I think that's beautiful. Something along those lines.